Tarkastad in the Eastern Cape once a year casts aside a quiet pastoral image. It means the Off-Road Brigade is back in town for the Quick Fit 400, which forms part of the South African Off-Road Championship. This year, the whole off-road circus descended on Tarkastad, and that meant the Quick Fit 400 formed part of the car, motorcycle and quad racer championships. And overnight, a sprawling tent town sprung up in what is one of the richest agricultural areas in South Africa. As is always the case, the paddock area was a hive of pre-race activity. For competitors, there are the pre-race formalities that include documentation and scrutineering. For technical crew, there are always last-minute adjustments to machinery, and some of those are a little more major than they would have wanted. A feature of this year's National Off-Road Series has been the resurgence of the manufacturer support. This is particularly the case in the production vehicle category, with an intense rivalry developing between manufacturers and distributors. The manufacturer involvement has led to a resurgence in the sport, with off-road racing basking in a sharp popularity curve in terms of numbers of entries and public interest. South African off-road racing has always enjoyed a strong following from the motorcycle and quad racer camps, with hardy competitors taking up the huge challenges the sport offers. An interesting battle was starting to develop at the top of the quad open class championship ladder. Consistency had taken Jacques Struwik to the top ahead of Brendan Badenhorst, with the pair of them accounting for 3 overall wins in the 4 events run so far this season. Struwik had 1 win to his credit against 2 of Badenhorst's, but 3 second places gave the Gauteng rider a 14-point edge.
Obviously Brendan, because he's been chasing me the whole year. I mean, he didn't finish Lichtenberg, that's why I made up points. I've been constant throughout the year. But he's quick. He's going to chase me the whole day tomorrow.
In the motorcycle categories, a terrific battle was raging in the 200 class between Kevin Fisher and Barry Creel, while Elmer Simons had a comfortable 250 class lead. In the open class championship, leader Darryl Curtis was going into the Quick Fit 400 with an injury cloud hanging over his head.
I went out practicing last weekend at the Volt, and I had an unfortunate accident where I put my foot out to correct myself, and I've torn the ligaments in my left knee. And I've actually got to go for an operation to have it fixed. It's a very sensitive injury, and you know, I put a knee brace on for today. I'm going to do the time trial and see how I feel. I'm a little bit worried about it, and hopefully it's not going to bug me too much, and I'll at least be able to have a decent ride tomorrow.
Junior Cox is already dreaming of following in his famous father's footsteps, and proud dad Alfie was at pains to point out that he's still in contention for yet another South African title.
This year in the championship, I think last year as well, you can throw away a race, and last year I won every single heat, so which means I had to throw away 20 points at the end of the day, and that's hard to throw away 20 points. And now at the desert race, yes, I never finished, but I've thrown away a 0. I think Darryl and the other guys will throw away 17 points, 15 points. I'm still leading.
Rising star Shamir Variawa and veteran Bucks Carolyn led the Special Vehicle Drivers and Co-Drivers Championships. The pair were teamed together again for the Quick Fit 400, but while Carolyn had a healthy cushion over Juan Moore among the co-drivers, there were problems for Variawa. For the youngster, there was plenty of pressure from Class B Championship leader Giel Nel, who was just 10 points in arrears.
There's a Class B guy, Giel Nel, who is, I think, 10 or 15 points behind us. So we need to finish the next 2 races or 3 races in front of him to win the championship.
Former motorcycle stars Neil Woolwich and Kenny Schulthammer comfortably led the drivers and co-drivers standings in the production vehicle category and went to Tarkastad with 4 wins already under their belts. Toyota privateers Cliff Wiechelt and Johan Smalberger have proved to be the surprise packages of the season, but Woolwich was expecting the toughest opposition on the Quick Fit 400 to come from one of the factory-supported teams.
I think it's going to be the Nissan, obviously. The Toyota is always good, and the N1 Land Cruiser is also very competitive. They've come a long way for privateers this year, and they're lying second in the championship. Their finishing rate's very good, and they're behind us in the championship, a while behind us in the championship, but they're still second, so they're a threat for the championship. But for the race itself, I think it's got to be the Nissan if it finishes, and the Toyotas.
Ominous signs for crews as they prepared for the Day 1 time trial that would determine Day 2 start times for the Quick Fit 400. As it turned out, the time trial provided a few problems for some of the more fancied runners. Among them were rally ace Enzo Kuhn and Francois Jourdan in the factory-backed Mitsubishi Colt. A good time was scuppered by a water splash and malfunctioning windscreen wipers.
We put all the effort to get a good time, and then we hit a single water splash in their wipers, so we had to get out and clean that. That took a minute off our time, so could have taken a leisurely ride.
Reigning special vehicle champions Franz Čepek Senior and Junior have not had a happy season. Their run of bad luck was again to surface on the time trial.
More bad luck?
Yeah, another bit of bad luck. This year seems to have got us with a bit of bad luck. We've had a bit of problems. This time we had a lovely run in the time trial, and at the end of the time trial we found that our Clement and Pinion seems to have a tooth missing. So I don't think we're going to be able to carry on. And I hope our bad luck is finished one of these days. It can't last forever.
Reigning production vehicle champions Api Reiniker and Robin Houghton were also time trial victims.
Without four-wheel drive, actually you can't drive this vehicle. You know, the tail is sweeping all over the place, and just a few k's further you hit a puncher with the backside coming out over a rock. So it was delayed by a puncher also. But we are going to try and fix it for tomorrow.
It wasn't all doom and gloom for top crews, with Eastern Cape pair Greg Harvey and Boy Stone setting the fastest time in the special vehicle category in the Castrol Racing Jimco. Neither Harvey nor Stone was showing much emotion, but they were third fastest overall, with former off-road and rally champions Hannes Krobler and Richard Leek second overall, and second in the production vehicle category in the new high-tech Nissan hardbody.
I think they've solved the problem on the power steering. They've changed the shafts, whatever, made it harder. And then we've put some harder springs in it, and we had a little bit of time to test it. So I think the handling will be a lot better. I just hope it's going to be reliable. I think that's our biggest problem. We know it's got the speed. The driver and navigator is not so slow, you know. So if it's reliable, I think we can maybe surprise some guys.
Race cam action from the Neil Woolwich and Kenny Scholthammer factory Mitsubishi Pajero, with the pair on their way to setting the fastest time overall on the time trial. That provided a promising start to their weekend, but there was a downside to matters, with the Pajero finishing the time trial minus reverse gear.
It's quite rough, but it really suits this car because it's quite nice and tight, you know. We've got a small problem, we don't have any reverse, so...
Go forward.
Yeah, we can only go forward, so we'll have to have a look at it.
The hub of the Quick Fit 400, the route for the event promised competitors a little bit of everything, with tight and rough sections interspersed with some high-speed bashes. This was an off-road race, and you didn't have to ask if it would mean another of those rise and shine before the sun peeps over the horizon days. The answer, of course, was yes. And once again, there was the usual pre-race activity, with everyone gearing up for what was going to be a long and tough day for crews, technical crew, and race officials. First car away was the factory Mitsubishi Pajero in the hands of Neil Woolwich and Kenny Scholthammer. A big crowd had braved the early morning chill to see competitors on their way, but among the non-starters were Franz Čepek Senior and Junior, with the Epson V Motors Raceco hors de combat after the time trial. Woolwich and Scholthammer were followed by the factory Nissan pair of Hannes Krobler and Richard Leek, with Greg Harvey and Boy Stone the first of the special vehicles to come under starters' orders. Time trial surprise packets, Carrot and Lawrence Duplessis were fourth car away in a Chenoweth, with Brandon Harkis and Tom Smith 30 seconds behind them in the Finstruct Raceco. Harkis and Smith were followed by Cliff Barker and Vic Camphor in the Quadrishaw Land Rover, and Shamir Variauer and Buck Carolyn in the Cornbake Jimco. Further down the field, drivers Arthur Abraham and Stratford Vogt, with journalist Elsa Tiart deputising for Scott Abraham, were looking for their first finish of the season in the American-imported Jeep Cherokee. All appeared to be going along smoothly for production vehicle leaders Neil Woolwich and Kenny Scholthammer. It then turned sour for the Mitsubishi Pajero crew, and mechanical problems saw them fail to arrive at the halfway mark service point. It was their first non-finish of the season, but there was more drama, with Woolwich and Scholthammer joined on the sidelines by Hannes Krobler and Richard Leek, who rolled the factory Nissan hardbody. Driver and co-driver escaped injury in a major crash. Greg Harvey and Boy Stone were quickly into the groove in the Castrol Racing Jimco, and were being chased by Brandon Harkis and Tom Smith. Also among the non-arrivals at the halfway mark were Carrot and Lawrence Duplessis in the Chenoweth. Team Duplessis were also victims of mechanical gremlins that cut short their day, but behind them Cliff Barker and Vic Camphor were sailing along in the Quadrishaw Land Rover. After knocking on the door in previous events, Barker and Camphor were looking for their first win of the season in the production vehicle category. The Land Rover was sounding as crisp as ever, and Barker and Camphor appear to have settled into a rhythm. Also going along steadily were Class D contenders Enzo Kuhn and Francois Jourdan, with their main opposition, the sister colt driven by Nars LaRue and Henny Terstegen, and the Nissan in the hands of Hein Krobbeler and Charles Volmerans. Racecam action is from the Kuhn-Jourdan Mitsubishi Colt. Pockets of mist often made visibility a problem, and on tighter and twistier sections of the route, the pace dropped, with crews having to show a fair amount of caution. The cautious approach to off-road racing was not yet on the agenda for Shanier Variauer and Bucks Carolyn in the Cornbake Jimco, while Arthur Abraham and Elsa Tiart were building up a head of steam in the mean-looking Jeep Cherokee. A puncture and having to help Hannes Frobler and Richard Leek after their accident was to take a little of the wind out of the Jeep's sails. Further down the field, some interesting little duels were starting to take shape. The Toyota Land Cruiser of Class D contenders Piet Hasbrook and Christo Bosch were starting to cross swords with the Land Rover of Anthony Schuen and Mark Uglietti. While these duels were emerging, other crews were working their way up the pecking order. Falling into this category was the Daus Penning Raceco. After a reasonable showing in the time trial the previous day, the pair were going along nicely and starting to pick up a couple of places. The Raceco was sounding healthy, but not so fortunate were Nars LaRue and Henny Terstegen, who were destined to join the growing band of non-arrivals at the halfway mark. That left Enzo Kuhn and Francois Jourdan fighting a lone Mitsubishi Colt battle in Class D. Towards the front of the field, matters were now looking rosy for Cliff Barker and Vic Camphor in the Quadrishaw Land Rover. The demise of Neil Woolwich and Kenny Schulthammer and Hannes Frobler and Richard Leek had left the Land Rover running at the head of the production vehicle category. They were mixing it with a gaggle of special vehicles, but looming up behind the Land Rover were reigning production vehicle champions Arthur Reinecker and Robin Helton in the Castrol Toyota Land Cruiser. And also on a charge were Bevan Berthold and Atang Machakaneni in the Speedstick Raceco. A dreadful time trial saw them start 20 minutes after the first car away, with the pair on a mission that saw them scything their way through the field. On a similar charge were Mark Corbett and Juan Moore in the Century Racing Raceco, with the pair starting a minute behind the Speedstick car. On the quad front, the racing was fast and furious, and setting the early pace was Brendan Badenhorst on the CJ Yamaha. Badenhorst was in spectacular form as he pushed hard in the opening stages to try and build up an early lead. The peace and tranquility in grazing lands was disturbed by the banshee wail of the quads, with some of the local population looking a little put out by it all. Chasing after Badenhorst was Jacques Struwik in the Sally's Answer FMF Racing Yamaha. Struwik wasn't letting the grass grow under his feet and was throwing the Yamaha around with gay abandon. It was hectic stuff from the quad brigade, with Brendan Martin also going well in the early stages on the 5-star Motors Yamaha. Martin was making only his second appearance of the season and started the day way down in 49th position in the championship. At this rate, he was well on the way to moving up a notch or two on the championship lists. Riders and machines were taking a pounding, and behind the front runners some good battles were starting to develop among the midfield riders. The progress of riders was being monitored by a couple of bovine enthusiasts who this time looked thoroughly bored with proceedings. There was time for boredom for Cornel de Villiers on another of the lifestyle racing bombardier entries, although he was going along at a slightly more sedate pace. He started in 4th place in the championship and was under pressure from Paul Chomser, who started the day only 2 points behind. The pace in the motorcycle section was just as hectic, and showing up early was Free State rider Graham McLaughlin on the Miller Moore Honda. McLaughlin was another who needed a good finish to improve on his championship position, and hot on his heels was 250 leader Clayton Enslin, who was again out on the Shimwells Yamaha. Veteran Jeremy Davies on another AGA LG Castrol KTM started the day just 1 point ahead of McLaughlin in the Open Championship, with both of them destined to end up among the non-finishers. Recent Castrol Winterberg winner Elmer Simons on yet another of the AGA LG Castrol KTMs was chasing after 250 leader Enslin, with Quinton Milton also in the 250 frame on a Miller Moore Honda entry. Bombing along at the front of the 200 class was Wayne Farmer on the Russell Campbell Kawasaki, who started the day 4th in the 200 class, a single point behind Jeff Voliter. Pre-event favourite Alfie Cox on the Natro Freight Castrol KTM was a little slow out of the starting blocks, but was making up ground and looking to make amends for a non-finish on the Toyota Desert Race. Behind Cox, the injury hit Darryl Curtis was going along steadily enough, and injury or no injury, still had it in him to do a little showboating for the cameras. First car to arrive at the refuel point at the halfway mark was the Castrol Racing Jimco of Eastern Cape pair Greg Harvey and Boy Stone.
Where goes it going?
The car's running perfect, and you're going to hopefully win today. You're going to try our best.
More often than not, located in remote country areas, refuel points on off-road races hardly stack up against Formula One facilities. What the two sports do have in common is that races can be won and lost in the pits and at refuel points. The action is always frenetic as service crew try and get their charges on their way again as quickly as possible. Well, some running repairs are a little more serious than others, but given the conditions, off-road racing service crews could probably teach their Formula One counterparts a little thing about the art of improvisation. Back on the route, the pace was taking its toll, and former motocross star Paul Henniker confirmed the fact.
What happened? The chain snapped and got caught up in the back here.
Are you out or can you repair it?
No, I've been here for 2 hours trying to get it out. Trying your hardest, breaking down and going nowhere. That's what gets to me.
Well, if Paul Henniker was going nowhere fast, the same could not be said of Greg Harvey and Boy Stone. But they had a problem looming up behind them. On corrected time, Bevan Berthold and Atang Makakhaneni in the Speedstick Jimco were now challenging for the lead after a terrific charge through the field, and the pressure was on for Harvey and Stone. Berthold and Makakhaneni were letting it all hang out in search of a second win this season and had moved ahead of the Cornbake Jimco of Shamir Variawa and Bucks Carolyn, both on the road and on corrected time. Stone and Harvey and Variawa and Carolyn were also under attack from Mark Corbett and Juan Moore. They had also blasted their way through the field and on corrected time were poised to move into second place overall and in the special vehicle class. But for others, more problems.
Took the jump too fast over here. It wasn't marked, and we basically broke the whole front diff out. Broke all the nuts off the idler arm, broke the right inch, the spring, pushed the prop sock back into the transfer case. So yeah, that's pretty much done.
A wry reaction from a stranded Jean-Pierre Joubert, but Cliff Barker and Vic Camphor were far from stranded. The Quadrishaw Land Rover pair had a stranglehold on the production vehicle category and were nearly 15 minutes ahead of Class D leaders Hein Frobler and Charles Volmerans in the Nissan Hardbody. It was a fine performance from the near-standard Nissan, with Frobler and Volmerans looking at a top 10 finish. Also looking at a top 10 finish were Class E leaders Noel and Robin Quinn in the ex-Woolrich Mitsubishi Pajero. The Pajero had hardly missed a beat, with the KwaZulu-Natal crew running around 5 minutes ahead of the Toyota of Andrew and Chris Birkin. The Birkins were running second in Class E, and for their part were locked in a late battle with the Mitsubishi Colt of Enzo Kuhn and Francois Jordan. Racecam action is from the Colt, which had gradually lost ground to Frobler and Volmerans. There was a little late race incentive for Kuhn and Jordan, who were only around 2 minutes adrift of the Toyota. The Birkins weren't the only Toyota crew coming under pressure. Reigning production vehicle champions Arpi Renneker and Robin Houghton in the Castrol Toyota Land Cruiser were rapidly being closed down by the Jeep Cherokee. Stratford Fucht had taken over driving duties from Arthur Abraham at the refuel and was charging after the Toyota, with the Jeep showing a fair turn of speed. Matters were also getting a little tight at the front of the quad category. Brendan Badenhorst was still out in front on the CJ Yamaha, but on corrected time only had around 3 minutes to spare on Brandon Martin on the 5-Star Motors Yamaha. Like many of the quad racers, Martin is a former Super Series short course star, but is equally at home in long-distance events. Martin was chasing hard after Badenhorst, and with a lead of about 20 minutes on third-place Mark Breckel, did not have to watch his back too closely. Breckel was another of the Super Series stalwarts, and although going along steadily on the Brasco refrigeration Yamaha, he was coming under a little pressure from Mark Potgieter in the closing stages. Well, off-road bikers aren't too interested in road traffic signs, and blasting along on the Shimwells Yamaha was overall and 250cc class leader Clayton Enselin, who was going along like the clappers. The bikers revel in high-speed sections like this, and trying to make a late run on Enselin was 500 class leader Alfie Cox on the Natro Freight Castrol KTM. Race leader Enselin was having one of those memorable days when everything fell into place, and Cox did not have much chance of making up 6 minutes, but was well in control of the open category. A AGA LG Castrol Panasonic star Elmer Simons had his day on the recent Winterberg Enduro, but second place in the 250 category would be enough to keep him ahead of the race winner Clayton Enslin in the championship standings. It was the 200 class that produced the closest finish of the day, with Wayne Farmer on the Russell Campbell Kawasaki eventually edging out championship leader Kevin Fisher on the Montage Print KTM. On corrected time, just 42 seconds separated the pair. Up at the finish, there were noisy celebrations for the Speedstick team, with Bevan Berthold and Atang Makakaneni putting the finishing touches to a win that after the time trial hardly looked to be on the cards. Not surprisingly, it was a victory that did not come easily.
Passing these guys in the dust was very difficult. So once we got onto the fast roads, we had a few times we had to push guys really hard from behind, and then we just paced well and got to the front. It was a lekker day.
I think that the event was very tight, very rocky and very bumpy, and thanks God the car held till the end of the race.
Charges through the field took Berthold and Makakaneni and Corbett and Moore into the first two places ahead of Harvey and Stone. A Class B win for Kiel Nell keeps alive his special vehicle championship hopes. More celebrations at the finish, with Cliff Barker and Vic Camphor completing a long overdue victory in the production vehicle category in the Quadrishaw Land Rover.
Look, we obviously saw the Nissan and the Pajero's pace, and I was of the opinion they wouldn't maintain it, they were going to damage the vehicle, so we just went out at the pace that suited the vehicle and the terrain, and that obviously paid off.
There was a little drama further down the field when Oppie Reinicker and Robin Houghton brought home a Castrol Toyota Land Cruiser that was carrying battle scars from a clash with the Jeep Cherokee. The two vehicles collided in thick dust, with the Jeep rolling, and it was a battered and bruised Stratford Vogt and Elsa Tiart who finally crossed the line to give the Jeep its first finish of the season. The Jeep was minus a few body panels, and it had proved to be an adventurous outing for co-driver Tiart and drivers Arthur Abraham and Vogt.
Yeah, well, that happens when you chase the front runners. We overtook Oppie, and then Oppie semi got lost, and he closed the gap on us, and he T-boned us on our side. And that happened at about 120 kilometers an hour, so we just rolled over. I don't know how many times.
A first win of the season for Cliff Barker and Vic Camphor in the production vehicle category. Class wins went to Probler and Volmerans and the Quinn combination. In the quad category, a wire-to-wire win for a tired but delighted Brendan Badenhorst.
The loop, first 40 Ks, rather tough. I think that was the toughest part of the whole race, the first 40 Ks and maybe the last 15 Ks. Otherwise, the rest of the route had a few hidden surprises every now and again. Weren't too many caution markers, so you have to be very careful all the time. Rather just, if you saw something, just slow down and take it easy in the rough stuff.
A win was just what Brendan Badenhorst needed on the quick fit, and he closed the championship gap to 6th place to Jacques Struwik to just 4 points. And a memorable overall win in the bike category for Clayton Enslin that saw him hand superstar Alfie Cox a rare defeat on South African soil.
It's really awesome. The day was very good. Dust was probably the biggest problem. The route, I'd say at the end of the day, it was a bit of everything. It made it interesting. But other than that, it was a really lovely ride.
In the bike category, overall and 250 honours to Clayton Enslin. Wayne Farmer edged out Kevin Fisher in the 200 class, with Alfie Cox once again king of the open category.